Bhavesh Vaghela. I'm the CEO of PayWizard. And essentially what we do as a business is we help operators, pay TV and OTT operators all over the world, acquire subscribers, grow ARPUs and reduce churn. But that's not why I'm standing here. I'm not going to give you a product pitch, I promise. I'm not going to talk anything about product at all. What we really want to explore is some of our research that we've just conducted. We've done a whole bunch of research around consumers as well as how operators are thinking about a number of topics. And it's all around the idea of how important is content versus the customer experience. And I'm not particularly somebody that's been in the media industry for a very long period of time. So I come from financial services and retailers and other markets. And in those kind of markets, customer experience is everything. Whereas in this market, it's all about the content, right? If you've got the right content, your customers will turn up. That's the theory, right? So one of the things that we were trying to explore is the notion that how important is customer experience in retaining your subscribers? If you're trying to build a subscriber base, you want to keep them loyal, how important is customer experience in order to do that? Or is it purely just about the right content? So we're trying to test this kind of theory and say, well, what are those elements, what do consumers think, and actually what do operators think, and how is that, what's the gap between the two? Now, when we talk about customer experience, we're not talking about the viewing experience, right? So that's a big disconnection between the media industry. When we talk about customer experience, we're actually exploring the experience of the entire customer journey and how the customer has every interaction with you as a service provider, not just, can I watch it on my tablet in 4K, right? Or can I watch it across multiple devices? I have to be thinking about the overall journey. So throughout the presentation, when I talk about customer experience and the customer journey, I'm talking about the end-to-end piece. How a customer engages with you from finding the service in the first place, for example, joining the service, how easy was it to join? Once I've joined, can I consume content pretty quickly? What happens if I'm consuming lots of content? Can I be upgraded? Can I grow my ARPUs, for example? What if I'm not consuming content? Am I a threat to churn? Can I downgrade you? Can I be proactive in the way I do that? What about the billing side, right? I mean, billing, it seems so old hat, but it's still important. You still be able to go collect the money, right? And what happens if I want to leave as a subscriber? How easy is it for me to go? And does that have a bearing on how subscribers feel about that brand and that service? And of course, if I want to come back, how easy is it for me to do so? And of course, whether you are an operator or a consumer, a lot of those points, you're completely the opposite spectrum, right? Because the consumer wants to leave as easy as possible. The operator never wants you to leave. And that causes friction, it causes challenges around how you perceive that brand. So, what we've been doing at PayWizard is, we do a lot of consumer research across the world, doing it for quite a few years now, but there's two sets that I wanted to explore today for you. The first one is on the left-hand side, is what do consumers think? So we've just done some research in 3 territories, the UK, the US, and down in the Philippines in the Asian market. About 1,000 consumers in each of those territories, just to get an understanding of what consumers feel about OTT versus traditional pay TV. What are the challenges when they're engaging with the system, engaging with the service? What are the key friction points? Those kind of areas. And then we're going to compare that with what operators are thinking about. So on the right-hand side, you'll see we've done some in-depth research in Europe, and we've been lucky enough to work with Ben Keane, who's an ex-IHS analyst, and he's been doing in-depth interviews for us, both in the European market and now in the US market, as well as next in the Asian market. And he's talking to senior executives in a whole bunch of different types of media organizations. So whether you're a traditional pay TV, cable satellite type company, whether you're a brand new OTT, whether you're a broadcaster that's going to free-to-air into paid, and trying to understand where they fit in their thinking around customer experience. And just to see if there's a gap, what's the gap between what the customers want and are we able as operators to deliver against that promise? That's what we're going to explore today. So first of all, let's look at the consumer side. Let's look at the key consumer research. A couple of things that come out of this. First of all, on the left-hand side, when we looked at all 3 territories and asked them, well, what kind of service do you sign up to? Not surprisingly, a big chunk of people have cable satellite services and subscribe to that, so you'd expect that, particularly in the US. What we're seeing over the last couple of years, and again, it's not a surprise, we're seeing a bigger chunk of people having OTT services. And you can talk to any analyst firm, you can go to any place and you can see people consuming content from a device or an online perspective. What's really interesting though this time round, which was compared to our previous year's research, is there is a growing base of customers that have both, more than one, right? And it was something like 12% last year if I remember rightly, and now in the US particularly it's like 41% now actually have both. So when people talk about cord cutting, we're not really seeing that as a massive trend. What we're seeing is consumers having multiple subscriptions. Now the question then is, if they're having multiple subscriptions, what bearing does that have on the overall share of wallet? Are they spending more or are they spending less? And we looked at that as well and said, well, what's actually happening? Actually this is the, I thought I'd saved that one, but anyway, it doesn't matter, different slide. So it's got the same stats in it. So essentially what we're saying here as well, so what's the difference once I've signed to an OTT service, am I likely to spend more or less? You know, because the notion is, right, if we, you know, certainly if I'm in the UK, I'm going to go and sign up to Netflix, and if I sign up to Netflix, I'm probably going to reduce my spend on my movies package or my traditional cable provider, right? Because I've got Netflix, I don't need that movie package anymore. Is that commonplace, and what are people doing? And that's actually a number that's growing year on year on year. So in the US, 17% of people last year that signed up to an OTT service actually reduced their spend elsewhere. That's a big hit, right? If you're a cable operator, that's a big hit in terms of some of your customers spending less money with you. Now, conversely, if you do a good job, they'll end up spending more money with you, but you have to do a good job, you have to build that customer loyalty over a period of time. And you can see the stats are pretty consistent, territory by territory by territory. And that, as I said, has been an increase from this time last year. And we see that continuing to be increased as well, actually. And there'll be more than just multiple subscriptions. People have 5 or 6 and they'll dip in and dip out as and when they want to see that piece of content. And you see those behaviors anyway today. The other thing that's quite interesting, it's overwhelming, and this is an obvious thing, right? Now 85% across all those territories of consumers expect a positive and a personalized experience at every stage of the customer journey, right? Now, that it's an obvious statement, and of course you're going to want to expect a positive customer experience. But if you just think about it, right? Think about your TV service that you engage with, that you're paying for, and think about the same with a retailer or an e-commerce site or a bank or something like that. You know, these other type of service organizations have been doing customer experience for years, probably decades. Now we could argue whether they're doing it well or not, that's not the question. The question is, are they focused on it? And the question is, are we as TV operators and service providers and broadcasters as equally focused on the customer being the center of our business? And that's an open question. I'm not sure that's the case yet. I think we're moving towards that direction. But it's quite an interesting fact statement. Now, so if you are feeling that you need to have a good customer experience, does that have any bearing for whether you sign up to a service or stay with the service or whether you leave the service? So does churn increase if you have a bad experience? Now, you would expect it to do so, right? If you have a bad experience, then I'm going to leave that service. So in this context, in the US, 25%, so 1 in 4 of your subscribers actually cancel their service because of a poor experience. Now, not cancel because they didn't have the right content, they canceled because you didn't treat them very well. That's a different thing. That shows you that maybe content is not the only thing that's important as you build a service, as you move forward. Now, obviously, in the same way, if you build a good quality experience, consumers are more likely to stay with you, especially if you think about it, right? When you binge watch a series, you've binge watched it, I don't need that service anymore, so I'm going to cancel, right? That's a typical thing that you do as consumers. We all do it, right? Now the question is, I'm less likely to cancel, even if my series is finished, if I feel I'm getting a good experience from that vendor. Right, so we have a real challenge, particularly in OTT, where it's like a 6-month, 3 months churn rates. You have to really think about how do you keep that customer for a longer period of time. We've got research specifically on each of those 3 territories. I'm not going to go through all 3 territories, I'll just focus on the US for now. We've got a white paper which you can freely download, which will give you all the detail, a lot more stats than I'm going to talk about today. So let's look at the US for a few minutes. interesting really, when we start delving into how consumers think about the overall journey and the experience that they have with you as a provider. So 30% of consumers experienced a negative interaction in some way with their service provider within the last 12 months. Right, so that's actually quite high, and it's probably higher if you really think about, people are not always truthful in questionnaires. But what's really interesting about it, that negative interaction results to direct cancellations of your service. So of those 30%, 42% of those 30% actually cancelled their subscription because of a bad experience. Those are huge numbers actually when you think about the volume of customers that are subscribing to your service, and that's got nothing to do with content. Zero, it's all to do with how you're being treated as a customer. Because we all expect to be treated in a particular way and a personalized way day in, day out with all the services that we have. Now, when I look at it and I've said, well, okay, so what are the top 3 negative experiences that you have within your service? Now, on the left-hand side, which is the traditional pay TV service, so this is your cable TV, your satellite, you kind of expect these, right? Inaccurate billing is number 1. Consumers hate the fact they get billed incorrectly. I mean, how dare they, right? We're not billed correctly and they're billing me too much and don't like that. I really hate it when I have to cancel the service. It's such a nightmare to have to go and cancel the service, right? That really is a big friction point. And the third one, oh my God, if I have to contact you, I'm going to be sitting there for ages until you respond. Right? This is nothing new, guys. I mean, it happens in every industry, okay? But that's the traditional guys. Now, what surprised me the most, and I must admit, when I saw the results, is I was expecting the OTT guys to be better. And they're not. The same top three apply to the OTT guys. Now, that's an unfair statement. They do a better job than the traditional players, but they're still not doing a great job. Okay, so even in OTT world, where it's damn easy to cancel, I'm still struggling with canceling my service. Right? So you've got to think about, well, what does that mean for the customer? How does that play? So then you've had a negative experience, whatever that experience happens to be. So how did the operator respond to that negative experience? Do you feel the operator did a good job to respond to you, or not a great job? 25%, so the little green bit at the end, said, yeah, actually, they responded pretty well, and I'm quite happy how they responded. Everybody else below that is in some way dissatisfied and growing in dissatisfaction as they get to the back end. Now, certainly that 10%, you can almost guarantee you're going to leave at some point, right? Because you've done a bad experience with them. So ultimately what you're saying is that almost 76% of your consumers have had a negative interaction, of consumers that have had a negative interaction, effectively have a damaged view of your brand and your service. And that causes churn. It causes disloyalty, it causes, well, I'm not going to sign to them again. And it's an interesting conundrum that you have, because you have great content that you want to watch, but do I really want to sign up to them again, really? I want to do that, I'll go through that process. So it's something that, it's a bit of a friction point in both areas. So I've just done a bit of a quick tour of the consumer research. As I said, there's a lot more in the paper. But let's switch camps right now, and let's talk about operators for now. So what's the gap? What do operators think? How do they feel about customer experience? Where do they sit in the journey? And how geared up are they as operators to be able to deliver an exceptional service to their customers? And what are the areas that they need to work upon? Right? These results I'm going to share with you are the European ones. The US ones are currently happening right now, and there'll be another paper that will come out which you can download, and you'll see a lot more about the US data. But these are European operators that are service providers such as OTT, cable satellite, broadcasters, effectively. Right? So the first finding, which is actually a very good finding, which is hopefully a good thing, is that customer experience is seen as a strategic priority for every single one of those types of groups. So at the top of those organizations, they recognize we have to deliver a great customer experience, and that's important. And you can see that's a quote from a SVOD CEO. I can not tell you who they are, but the SVOD CEO has actually said it's strategic because it's the only way to fight churn is to have the best customer experience. So they get it, we all get it, right? We all know we've got to deliver a good customer experience. So that's the first step, so we all know that we are thinking in the right way. What about the next thing? So if we think about customer experience, let's focus a little bit more on the data side. Are you using data and intelligence in order to drive the different stages of the customer experience? Are you using data to understand how do I move a customer from one stage to the next? Or how do I make sure I've got the right offer in front of them, or I'm giving them the right package, making sure they're getting the best service at every stage. And what we found is that there is a huge variety on how organizations are leveraging data, right? Actually, very surprisingly, you would expect certain types of organizations to be ahead of the curve. Most people are still struggling with understanding what to do with the data, right? And you'll see a little bit in terms of where they're sitting. So when we talk about the customer journey analytics scorecard, and we look at all those interviews that we did and say, well, so where are you investing? Where are you spending time and understanding your data? It's actually a very interesting picture. I'm not sure if you can read the words on the left-hand side, but essentially at the top there you've got customer acquisition. So a big chunk of the people that are interviewed are focusing their attention on getting customers on board, which actually makes sense. You want to get customers on board. There's a lot of people focusing on the viewer, what they're watching, those kind of analytics, which arguably has been used for advertising, used for production of content and as you move forward. A bit on recommendation engines, a bit on churn reduction, and a bit on billing. Now, that billing one's interesting, right? When you think about what was the biggest friction point that consumers had, was poor billing, and you're thinking, hold on a second, should we not just do our basics right first, get our billing right? And then how do you win back customers? So there's a big disparity in terms of where customers, operators feel they need to be focusing on. But they seem to be taking it in a siloed approach. So I'm going to look at it for this part of the journey without really thinking about how it affects this part of the journey. And actually I'm going to do it for this segment and not for that segment. And there's a little bit of a confusion about how do they manage those pieces. And that's not to say they're doing it badly, it's just the market's moving so quickly and consumers are so demanding that they need to be able to address these kind of issues. There we go. And again, coming back to what we talked about with the consumer side, this is a pretty consistent message from every single type of operator we spoke to. That is that when they feel that the biggest weakness they have in the analytics side, it's ability to predict when you're going to walk away, predict my churn, and then how am I going to win back lost subscribers? Because if everybody's focused so much on winning customers, they've completely forgotten about the fact that once the customer's on board, what are you going to do with them? How are you going to make sure you retain their services? And that's quite a big area in terms of how do you solve that problem. The third finding is, well, how mature are they in understanding and using data? Again, similar to the finding number 2, where they were using it in multiple places, they're all actually very much in the starting block. Most operators are starting off with trying to understand how we're going to use data. Because we all know data's in silos, it's in different systems, it's all over the place, and we've got to try and get it together and then think about what we're going to do with it. And most companies are still in that phase in understanding that whole data evolution, which is quite interesting, but that's again a natural progression as customers move forward. So when we then plot the different type of companies with how advanced they are in using analytics, the biggest surprise to me was that OTT wasn't winning. I mean, you look at Netflix, you look at how much money they spend on analytics. They do a good job, one would argue, do a pretty good job. But obviously a lot of other OTT brands are struggling with how do they compete with that kind of insights. Telcos are way behind. Telcos are struggling in terms of how do they manage the quad plays, how do they manage the TV side of their business, and are still struggling to piece all that together. And broadcasters do a better job, but they're focusing in a slightly different way. One, they're more niche and trying to figure out payment plays, but also they've got the advertising piece that they're working towards. But it's quite an interesting picture in terms of where you are certainly from a European point of view, and we'll be interested to see what that looks like from a US and then an Asian perspective, and we'll track that year by year. So based upon the consumer research and then based upon the operator research, I guess there's some things to consider, and I'm not suggesting that you know, these are, you know, your 8 steps to being your mantra, but these are observations that we came out with and said, hold on a second, that's interesting. Should we be considering something different? So I've put my 8 thoughts together and see what you guys think about these. So first thing is, be clear about what you're hoping to achieve. Now that's another obvious statement, right? But think about it connected, not just within one stage of your journey. So what happens when my customer abandons my shopping cart when they're trying to sign up my service? What's my process to get them across? Retailers do that phenomenally well. You know, ultimately an OTT is an e-commerce transaction, right? How do we bring on board best practices from other industries in order to show the experience that consumers have everywhere else? And then what does that mean once I sign up? How am I going to get you consuming content? You know, typically you have 3 to 6 months to do so. So think about that as an overall end-to-end and see where your gaps are and try and focus on the areas that are going to make the most impact quickly. Number 2 is everybody talks about big data, right? And everybody, I'll get all this data together and we're going to do some stuff with it. The question is, you probably don't need all of that data. You need to know what data you're really going to need for each stage of the journey. And certainly in Europe, you know, with the GDPR regulations and stuff like that, there's a limited amount of data you're going to be able to leverage anyway. So thinking very carefully about the type of data that's important at each stage, and then leveraging that to drive that interaction with your customer. So you may find you don't need to bring as much of it together as you thought in order to drive each of those different stages. The third one is don't be afraid to fail, and this is another obvious one, right? But again, it came out quite consistently in the operator research that we did. The notion that operators were scared to try stuff in case they failed or they didn't get their customers on board. Now, you know, online companies, e-commerce companies, they do that all the time. They try things, they try offers, they're very proactive, you know. I mean, the last time you went to a big department store in the US and you went into, it was a sunny day and they're selling barbecues. They already know it's a sunny day and they're selling barbecues, right? So why can't we as OTT or TV service providers know the kids are off school, it's raining on the weekend, let's put a proactive offer to the parents, here's 3 for 2 Disney movies. I mean, just be much more proactive, think about stuff and trying it out in terms of you know, small segments, run campaigns, learn from them, and keep on going. That's what most other industries do as well. Number 4 is do the basics well. I must admit I was very surprised when billing came up to the top again. I am surprised at that, but it's, you know, it's what the customers are saying. So billing still is important. And actually when we look at billing compared to the US versus Europe and Asia, I can certainly see billing as a massive friction point in some Asian markets and developing markets, but I was a little bit surprised at some of this in certainly the more mature markets. But certainly, billing is an issue. Being able to contact you is an issue. Those are the key issues that you need to try and resolve in terms of how you know, the basic stuff, right? Basic stuff of me subscribing to your service. Number 5 is probably a little bit controversial, but don't just focus on acquisition. Don't over-focus on acquisition. I'm not saying don't focus on acquisition, because of course you've got to get customers on board, right? But the thing is this, you saw by the research, the data, it's such a skew towards getting customers on board that you've forgotten the whole rest of the journey. So what am I going to do with these customers? So think about that. What happens when they sign up? How am I going to give them the best experience when they sign up? And then, it's the old adage, right? Isn't it easier to sell to an existing customer? Did you notice on the what they were using for in what they're using data for? They weren't using data for growing ARPU at all, in any shape or form. I think it was one company. I think they were saying that you're not. Now that does depend on the type of packages you have and whether there is different packages that you can offer. But the question is, should you be marketing better to your existing base in order to grow your ARPUs, if you have that capability in the payment structures? Now this is a controversial one. Don't be scared of churn, right? Because actually there's a number of things. One of all, if you think about the mobile industry almost 15 years ago, you remember when everybody was buying mobile phones and acquisition was going through the roof, and overnight people started leaving their service providers and buying mobiles from other companies, especially when their contracts were running out. So then mobile operators started thinking about churn, think, oh my God, I'm losing my customers. Now what they figured out was, actually it doesn't matter if some of my customers churn. Because guess what? Their serial churn is going to come back again and again and again. What I really care about is these segment of customers. They shouldn't churn. I'm going to do whatever I can to keep them. But others, I'm not really, it's okay. They're going to keep on coming back to me when the time is right. The same thing applies, in particular with OTT, because we're in and out all the time. So actually, if you make it really hard for me to leave your service, that puts a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm going to think twice before I sign up again. Whereas if you make it really easy for me to leave, the next time you have a show that I want to watch, it's so easy, it's such an obvious thing, I'm going to go sign up again. Right? So you have that dip in, dip out, and it's proven that actually a good cancellation process, handled well, increases brand loyalty. And that's proven in every industry, not just this industry. So number 8, which again is pretty obvious, is don't just focus on one area. Think about your overall journey. Think about the different stages and where your gaps are and how you can improve each of those stages. And it's so often when we go and talk to operators all over the world, they think they have a problem in a particular area, they're focused down in the area, and they neglect some of the other pieces that, all the good work you've done at the front end of joining the service gets destroyed as soon as you sign up and you can't watch properly, or you get billed incorrectly, and all of a sudden your whole loyalty has gone down the drain. So that's our guide to loving your subscribers, the 8 steps of our thoughts in terms of what you can consider. So, and the reason why, and I think this is the reason why we're standing here, we're in these kind of shows, trying to build better customer experience, is that we know that if we did this well, customers will become more loyal to us. Because we're consumers ourselves, we're loyal to certain brands because they treat us better. It's relatively straightforward. So 87% of us will be more loyal, right? That's, says it all, really. It's a pretty big number. So that's the last bit of research side. Here's the promo. So if you want to download our white paper, it just came out 2 weeks ago. This has got a lot more detail than I've shared with you today. Please do go download it, have a look at it. Any other questions, then do come and find us. PayWizard is just up over there, but I'll be around for a few minutes anyway after. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.